I never thought I'd find myself posting here, but I've been reading stories on Reddit for a while, and maybe sharing mine will help me sort through everything that's happened. My wife and I have been married for 15 years, although the word married feels like a lie now considering what she and her children have done. We met when I was working a respectable job that paid enough for me to live comfortably. She was fresh out of a divorce with 2 kids who were 7 and 9 at the time. I remember feeling this overwhelming desire to protect them all, to be the person they could rely on, and to give them a stable life. I truly believed that stepping up as a father figure would make everyone's life better. The kids at first seemed to welcome me. I took them out for pizza, taught them how to ride bikes, helped with homework, and attended every single school event. I even found myself giving up some of my hobbies to spend more time with them. It felt like I was living a dream. Family vacations, game nights, the works. My wife said she was grateful for how seriously I took my role. She'd gush to our friends about how I was doing what their biological father never did. He barely paid child support, never showed up for birthdays, and was basically a ghost in their lives. I never asked for anything in return besides love and respect. Maybe that was my mistake, trusting that they would appreciate me without me insisting on it. See, I grew up in a strict household where my father drummed into me that family is everything. In that spirit, I went beyond what most step-parents might do. From school supplies to doctor's visits, from baseball uniforms to tutoring sessions, I covered it all. And I did it gladly, convinced that this would bond us forever. Over the years, I paid for private schooling so they'd have every advantage. When my stepson wanted to learn martial arts, I covered the lessons and gear. When my stepdaughter decided on a study abroad program, I emptied my annual bonus to send her. I never hesitated. I was always the one driving them to weekend activities and hanging around afterward to treat them and their friends. Everything from birthdays to holidays, I funded it all, convinced we were building a loving bond. As they grew, though, small jabs started. They'd refer to me by my first name instead of calling me Dad. Then they'd joke about Mom's random husband. I tried addressing it with my wife, who dismissed it as normal teen teasing. She promised they truly cared about me. Subtle changes in my wife also alarmed me. She stopped involving me in big decisions, like whether to purchase the kids their first cars or allow spring break trips. She'd simply proceed, then ask me for funds later. If I voiced concern, she'd say, "Don't worry, I've got it under control," all while spending my money. I reassured myself that once the kids matured, they'd appreciate what I was doing. Then came the comments that cut deeper. My stepson complained I'd bought him a crappy used car. My stepdaughter introduced me at her graduation party as just some guy Mom married. Seeing my wife's indifference stung, but I kept quiet, hoping it was just a rough patch. My attempts to speak up were brushed aside. I believed we'd eventually become the close family I yearned for, but the signs of their true feelings were everywhere. That realization was soul-crushing. I kept working longer hours, turning down travel-heavy promotions so I could stay close to home. I wanted to prove my commitment. My stepson graduated and enrolled at a local college. He asked for a car, so I found him a reliable sedan. A week later, I overheard him telling his biological father that the car I got was junk. I confronted him, expecting an apology or explanation. He shrugged and told me I was being oversensitive. My wife scolded me afterward, telling me to stop pushing him. She said kids say thoughtless things and I needed to let it go. Meanwhile, my stepdaughter was entering her final year of high school. She dreamed of a huge graduation party. I rented a nice venue, hired a caterer, even booked a DJ. During the party, I heard her introduce me to someone as just some guy Mom married. That cut me deeper than I cared to admit. I pulled my wife aside later, asking if she heard it, if she cared. She patted my arm and said I was reading too much into things. I felt more alone in that moment than ever. The dynamic in the house became unbearable. I was expected to pay for everything, yet had no real say. The kids openly mocked me, calling me by my first name or ignoring me altogether. My wife would brush it off, saying I shouldn't take teenage banter personally. But these weren't little kids anymore. They were nearly adults. They knew exactly what they were doing. I tried one last time to demand respect after overhearing my stepson joke about how he could milk me forever. He just laughed when I confronted him. My wife sided with him, calling me sensitive. That was the beginning of the end for me. I realized the situation was toxic. I was tired of giving without respect. I started reviewing our joint finances. I discovered my wife had been funneling money into an account under her mother's name. My stepson had insurance bills that were months overdue, and I saw charges on my credit cards that I didn't recognize. Everything felt like a slap in the face. When I confronted my wife, she told me I had no right to question her spending. She reminded me I had promised to take care of her kids, so why was I acting so shocked now? Instead of blowing up, I stayed calm. I gathered documentation, bank statements, emails, and even screenshots of social media posts where my stepkids mocked me for being an ATM. I reached out to a lawyer explaining the situation. He said I needed to protect my assets immediately. Following his advice, I opened a new account, rerouted my direct deposits, and left just enough in the joint account to cover a few bills. I wanted them to think everything was still normal while I prepared my exit. At home, I pretended to be my usual self, which wasn't difficult since they never paid much attention to me anyway. The sense of betrayal was eating me alive, yet I knew losing my temper would only hurt my chances of a fair settlement. My wife was oblivious, confident I'd never walk away because of our family bond. But that bond was one-sided. I documented every moment of disrespect, every dime spent on frivolous items. My lawyer was appalled, saying it was some of the worst exploitation he'd seen. He urged me to be careful because once I started cutting them off, there'd be backlash. I told him I was ready for whatever came next. I hit my breaking point the night I came home to find my stepdaughter hosting a huge party, loud music, strangers everywhere, and no respect for the fact that I had just worked a 12-hour shift. When I tried to shut it down, she scoffed and called me a control freak. My wife laughed, telling me I was overreacting. I'd never felt so disrespected in my own home. That was when I decided enough was enough. I locked myself in the bedroom and quietly packed a suitcase. In the early morning, while everyone slept, I left. I drove to a motel and called my lawyer. He immediately filed for legal separation. I canceled credit cards, stopped automatic payments on the cars, and changed every password I could think of. My phone blew up within hours. Angry messages from my wife demanding I come back, from my stepson calling me petty, from my stepdaughter cursing me out for ruining her life. I ignored all of it. At work, I told HR that I'd changed my banking details and was dealing with a personal matter. They were understanding and made sure all updates were private. My wife stormed into my workplace, screaming about how I'd abandoned her children. Security had to escort her out. The only emotion I felt was relief. Finally, I was no longer a prisoner to their constant demands. My lawyer told me to keep all communication through him or email, so I blocked their numbers. My wife tried using her friends' phones, but I recognized the area codes and ignored those calls too. I'd sacrificed years of my life only to be treated like a wallet with legs. Now they could find another source of income. I was done playing the fool. I was free, and I loved it. In the following days, the separation papers were served. My wife bombarded me with emails claiming I was destroying the family, insisting the kids couldn't survive without my income. My stepson wrote me a message labeling me selfish for not continuing his tuition payments. My stepdaughter demanded I reinstate her credit card because she needed it for emergencies. None of them apologized or acknowledged how they treated me. With my lawyer's help, I combed through all our joint assets. I discovered that the mortgage was solely in my name, even though my wife had insisted we refinance years ago for a better rate. Now, she was responsible for payments, but had never taken steps to remove my name from the loan or deed. My lawyer advised me to push for full removal, letting her handle the mortgage alone. She'd have to refinance or risk foreclosure. During mediation, my wife tried to play the victim. She said I'd abandoned my obligations, that I'd promised to be a father to her kids. I calmly presented evidence of their insults, the secret account, and the credit card debt they'd run up. The mediator asked her to explain the disrespect, but she had no real defense. She kept repeating that I was overreacting. My stepson and stepdaughter refused to attend, but they sent statements about how I was ruining their futures. Not one line in their statements showed gratitude. It was all about money and blame. Ultimately, we agreed I'd give them a modest sum to finalize the separation. I refused to pay spousal support. My lawyer argued that her hidden accounts proved she had funds. When the mediator saw the mocking texts, I think they sympathized with me. We left that room with a tentative settlement, but I knew the real fight had just begun. Once the settlement terms were drafted, I insisted they remove my name from the mortgage. My wife fought that, arguing it would hurt her chances of keeping the house. I didn't care. After everything, I wasn't about to trust her with my credit or my future. If she wanted the property, she could figure out the financing. If she failed, the bank would foreclose. That wasn't my problem anymore. Word spread among our acquaintances that I'd cut them off. A few mutual friends reached out, asking if there was any chance at reconciliation. I told them the truth. I was done being used. Some understood, others accused me of being heartless. But I couldn't bring myself to care about their opinions. They hadn't seen the texts, the snubs, the endless demands for money. My stepson sent one final email, accusing me of abandoning him in college. He said he'd have to drop out if I didn't keep paying. My stepdaughter wrote that she was traumatized by my betrayal. Neither expressed regret for how they'd treated me. I deleted their messages without responding. My lawyer had advised me to maintain evidence of their harassment, so I kept copies but refused to engage. The sense of relief was overwhelming. I started sleeping better, focusing on my own life for once. I joined a gym, reconnected with old friends, and found myself smiling without feeling guilty. It was as if I'd reclaimed a piece of myself they'd stolen. When the final court date arrived, I walked in with my head held high. My wife tried one last time to guilt trip me, but I stood my ground. The judge approved our agreement, and I walked out a free man. I refused to look back, determined to live without the burden of their ungrateful demands. I later learned my ex-wife struggled to refinance. The bank wouldn't approve her loan, and she didn't have a cosigner. She ended up defaulting, and the house went into foreclosure. Friends told me she blamed me, telling everyone I'd set her up to fail. But that was a consequence of her own actions. If she'd treated me like a partner instead of an ATM, maybe things would have gone differently. I heard through the grapevine that my stepson dropped out of college and started working part-time. My stepdaughter moved in with her boyfriend, who apparently wasn't keen on supporting her shopping habits. They tried to paint me as the villain, spreading rumors that I'd tricked them and run off. But some mutual friends knew the truth and defended me, which only enraged them further. Meanwhile, I thrived. My work performance skyrocketed once I didn't have to deal with constant stress at home. I got a promotion with a nice pay bump. I took a solo vacation, something I'd never done before, and rediscovered what it meant to enjoy life without guilt. I even started dating again, cautiously, but with a healthier perspective on boundaries and respect. My ex-wife tried contacting me to make amends, which really meant she wanted financial help. Her message danced around the topic, but it was obvious. She claimed the kids missed me, that we could be a family again if I would just forgive and forget. But I remembered every insult, every time they called me a random guy or made jokes about my generosity. I wasn't about to walk back into that nightmare, so I sent a short reply. I owe you nothing. Please don't contact me again unless it's through my lawyer. Then I blocked her everywhere. I felt no remorse, only righteous satisfaction. I moved into a new apartment, modest but comfortable, and found happiness in my independence. Sometimes I'd wake up expecting chaos, but then I'd remember I was free. My attorney finalized the paperwork, ensuring I had no remaining financial ties to my ex-wife or her children. The relief was indescribable. I spent weekends renovating my new place, painting walls in colors I liked, setting up a home office, and discovering my personal style. I never realized how much I'd compromised my tastes for theirs. A friend asked if I ever missed having a family. I told him I'd never actually had one, not in the real sense. What I had was a transactional arrangement masquerading as family life. Occasionally, curiosity got the best of me, and I'd wonder how they were doing, but I never reached out. I refused to break my own peace. I'd hear snippets, my stepson complaining online that life's unfair, my stepdaughter lamenting she couldn't afford her old lifestyle. They never seemed to connect the dots that they'd burned the bridge with the one person who supported them. My ex-wife apparently tried online dating, but it didn't go well once prospects learned about her baggage. Meanwhile, my own dating life flourished at a slower, steadier pace. I met people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. I took my time, built friendships first, and set boundaries early. It felt foreign at first, but also empowering. I wouldn't repeat old mistakes. One evening, I got a letter from my ex-wife. She begged me to help with some medical bills for my stepdaughter. I didn't respond. I had no reason to. They'd chosen to treat me like a stranger, and strangers don't pay each other's bills. I slept soundly that night, guilt-free. These days, I live a life where I'm nobody's backup plan. I've learned that trust should be earned, not handed over blindly. I feel no obligation to fix the mess they've created, and I harbor no guilt. Their betrayal cut deep, and I chose revenge by reclaiming my life and resources. That's more satisfying than any dramatic showdown. They wanted an ATM, but I wanted a family. We both learned who we were. Some people might think I'm bitter, but I call it clarity. Betrayal isn't something you just forgive because someone feels regret when the money runs out. I've moved on. My ex and her kids can face the consequences of their actions without my support. If that makes me the bad guy in their eyes, I'm okay with that. I don't lose sleep wondering if they hate me. They had ample chances to change their behavior. Gratitude, respect, these aren't optional in a family. Without them, all you have is a financial arrangement. When they exposed their true colors, I responded by removing myself from their equation. That was my right. I'm sharing this here because I see others going through similar heartbreak, wondering if they should stick it out for the sake of family. But family is supposed to stand by you, not treat you like a walking wallet. If you find yourself in a situation like mine, don't ignore the red flags. Protect yourself. Love isn't meant to be one-sided. I don't regret a single thing. My life is peaceful now. I've made new memories and plans that revolve around my own happiness. They lost a good man who tried his best to care for them. In the end, I did the only sensible thing. I walked away, and I have no intention of ever looking back.